Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today at the Department of Health Abu Dhabi stand at Arab Health. This talk today continues a series of the future of healthcare. We'll be talking about research and innovation in life sciences and how that's changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome to this panel discussion. My name is Nick Webster, a reporter of the national newspaper, and I'm your moderator today. We have never before seen this level of investment, engineering, and ingenuity compressed by industry to fight one disease that we have seen during the global pandemic of COVID-19. It was the largest collective private sector research and development program in history, and Abu Dhabi itself conducted more than 325 research studies contributing to the deployment of innovation and research to address the pandemic globally. The UAE scored the lowest death rates among patients infected with COVID-19 and also topped the world in its vaccination rates. Today, at this panel discussion, I will be speaking with four of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies to learn about how clinical research has changed forever during the onset of the pandemic. With me for this conversation, if you'd like to join me at the stage, please, from the Department of Health, we have Dr. Asma Al-Manai, who is Executive Director of Abu Dhabi's Research and Innovation Centre. Welcome. From AstraZeneca, I'm joined today by Haleb Al-Adab, who is Associate Director for Gulf Government Affairs. Welcome. And from Pfizer, we have Hazam Nazmi, who is Director of Policy and Public Affairs for the Gulf States. GlaxoSmithKline's representative today is Jeff Kamprikos, who is Director of Communications for Government Affairs and Market Access. Welcome, Jeff. And last but not least, from Roche, we have Ahmed Majdi, who is Head of UAE Corporate Communications. Please sit down. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Well, thanks for the time today. It's certainly an interesting topic to see how successful Abu Dhabi was, and the UAE in particular, about handling the pandemic and how you guys worked collectively together behind the scenes and with the Department of Health to have this incredible response against COVID-19. Dr. Asma, if I can start with you, please. During the pandemic, the Department of Health shortened its clinical research review cycle, I understand, from months to just 8 days, if that's right? That's a significant reduction in time. How important was that? And what has the impact of that been since around about January, February time, 2020? Let's have a look. Is this on? There we go, try that.
Hello?
Yeah, I think it's on now. It's on? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is a very important question. One of the lessons learned during the pandemic is that we have to be an agile regulator. There is time, pressure, challenges that is facing every healthcare regulator around the world. And we have learned that we need to be more agile in dealing with research, because honestly there has been no known cure so far during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic for COVID. There is no known vaccine, and we need to find solution, and the regulator need to be part of such solution. So we look at our processes. What can we do better? How can we improve and be more enabling and supporting the researcher in order to reach the solution much more fast than the usual process? And we have created a centralized IRB committee that will be responsible for ensuring a shorter period of time in terms of the review. We work 24/7, day and night. And I thank all the members of the committee that are representing the provider side, the academia side, and the scientist side to ensure that all the protocols that they have reviewed are up to the highest standard from an ethical point of view and scientific point of view. And we have achieved it. So it is not only the Department of Health, it's the partnership and the collaboration between different members of the committee and even the above and beyond, the bigger stakeholders that enabled us to achieve this amazing KPI of 8 days maximum for from submission to decision. And I believe this is one of the key successful factors.
There have been many success stories that we will come on to shortly, both in vaccines, as we all know about, and also antiviral treatments and other treatments for the seriously ill. We'll come on to that later on. Hello, if I can come to you with AstraZeneca. I mean, the company names, maybe people outside of medicine didn't know much about companies like Pfizer or GSK or AstraZeneca. Now they're front and center of how we live our lives, getting vaccines, getting boosters. How did AstraZeneca change as a company from the onset of the pandemic to become almost a vaccine company in its own right? Can you explain a bit more about that process and how that evolved?
Thank you, Nick, and thanks for the opportunity of being here among the esteemed guests. To be honest, I'll build on what Dr. Asma was just saying. It's all about that agility and the mindset of change. So we've all been faced with the same pandemic. And at AstraZeneca, basically, we always had that understanding that no one is safe unless everybody is safe. And that was our key starting point. How can we live our value of patient centricity and make sure that we're part of that solution? And that's how basically we used and lived to the maximum our collaborative mindset and partnership agenda was brought to life. So basically we combined the experience and expertise of Oxford University in terms of science into our global manufacturing and development capabilities, and took a pledge of making sure that we are distributing equitably and broadly the vaccine to the world at no profit during the pandemic. And today we proudly say that basically around 2.5 billion doses of our vaccine has been supplied to 170 countries, out of which basically 2/3 of them are to low and lower to middle income countries. But this partnership agenda did not stop on the vaccine, because yes, the vaccine are great tools to manage the pandemic. However, again, we had to put patient first. And that's where we accelerated, and back to Dr. Asma's point about the acceleration of processes, how we accelerated to bring a hope to patients who cannot benefit from vaccines. So the high-risk patients, the immunocompromised patients. And that's how, again, through our collaboration with the UAE authorities, the Department of Health, the Ministry of Health, we made sure that the UAE was among the first countries in the world to procure, to register, and to receive and administer Evusheld, which is our monoclonal antibody combination targeting immunocompromised patients and patients who cannot really benefit from vaccines. So it's all back again to your question. It's all about the agility, the collaborative mindset, and the willing to change.
And I guess that agility will continue as we see these drugs develop in the future, where they, for that last mile of vaccination programs around the world, particularly in low middle income countries where drugs might well be administered intramuscular rather than intravenously, to enable healthcare practitioners to deliver it all over the world in areas where it might be harder to get clinics working. If I can come to Pfizer, Hossam Nazmi, welcome.
Thanks, Nick.
I think we all know about Pfizer now around the world, one of the key vaccines in this pandemic. What did government authorities do to enable access to the innovation and the acceleration that process brought during the pandemic? Can you explain a bit about how that worked as well, please?
Nick, thank you very much actually for the excellent question. And before I answer the question, I would like really to thank you and thank the Department of Health for the invitation, for being here today, and to speak to you and speak to the audiences. So the COVID pandemic is one of the diseases that actually we have never seen before in the history. Actually, it touched everyone in the world. And it has made us think about things that we did not actually thought it could be exist 2 years back. So this is for us as Pfizer and industry, and also for the governments. So I can speak, of course, a lot about what actually Pfizer did to come up with this vaccine to save the world. But to answering your question about what exactly the government did, they did a lot of things. from the strategy of the rulers of the country, first of making the vaccines and treatments available, with no doubt about it, with the confidence they give to their people and to the residents in the country, and then going to the execution itself. Adopting the concept of learning as we go was one of the most important things that the government authorities adopted and executed here, because nobody actually was aware about what is happening or what is going to happen after 1 month or 2 months. And then the speed they brought to the regulatory processes we have never seen before. The level of communication with the pharma industry, the day-to-day updates about what is happening, and also the readiness from the government side to be a partner in the innovation itself. So when we spoke first about the vaccine, which could come in a 6 month or 7 month, they considered the government as partners in the innovation. So they were ready to take the risk and to think with us and to give us all we need to make the vaccine available in the country. Think about the infrastructure that the government made here in the country to give the vaccine to everyone. So this is actually not easy. Think about the number of nurses, the number of doctors, even to the needles were actually used in the vaccination.
Yep.
Think about the supply chain, how the vaccine was actually stored, how it was shipped from the manufacturing site to the vaccination site day by day. It was not actually a shipment per year, it was happening every day. So how this vaccine was actually stored, distributed to the vaccination center, behind the scene actually was actually a lot of efforts. And the result of that the rate of vaccination in the Emirates actually was the top among the world. This was during vaccine. So what actually happening after that for the innovation in the life science? I'm really proud to share that we have signed with the Department of Health and with the support of Dr. Asma last month in December a memorandum of understanding. The concept of this memorandum of understanding is to train researchers to be a qualified researcher. We are targeting 100 researchers in the first year and to reach to 500 qualified researchers in 2025.
Wow.
Those researchers will be able to execute a phase 1 and drug innovation clinical trials in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. And of course, this is supportive to the vision of the country to have the country and the Emirate of Abu Dhabi as a destination for the healthcare in the whole world.
Thank you. It seems like the UAE is really becoming a hotbed for clinical research now, and it's the go-to destination for science. That will attract talent as well in the future to come here and complete this kind of research. Jeff, if I can come to you, welcome. There's been many success stories during the pandemic with certain drugs and treatments, as we well know. We've seen the emergence of new variants, particularly Omicron, become the dominant variant around the world. And I'd like to get from you just the process of changing the vaccines and how easy or difficult that is to cope with these new strains when they emerge, these new mutations. So how easy is it to reformulate or re-engineer a vaccine when these new variants appear, and how long would that typically take in your experience with GSK?
Well, thank you, Nick. Very happy to be on this panel today with my colleagues from the industry and Dr. Asma, of course, one of the pillars of life sciences and biopharma research in Abu Dhabi. So one thing I would like to, just before I address that question, I would like to say it's also been remarkable the amount of research, data, evidence as we moved along on the COVID journey that the Department of Health has put out there, published, and been willing to share. And we've seen this at the federal level and Department of Health Abu Dhabi. And I think as the country that often moved first and as the emirate that moved first, so Abu Dhabi moved first and often in terms of procurement, rollout, changing guidelines, the fact that you pumped out those data, that wasn't just important for the UAE or the Gulf. That was important for the world. I saw media reports relating to our product, our therapeutic, picked up in Brazil, Philippines, Russia, Turkey. The data that the Department of Health was putting out there went global, went worldwide. Now, of course, Nick has asked me the question, the science and the engineering question about vaccines. So you're looking at the guy who's the C student in science and engineering, right? So I knew Nick was going to do this to me. But so what I can tell you is the process, Nick, without getting into the engineering. I mean, GSK is one of the globally leading vaccine companies. I'm up here on the dais with a whole bunch of leaders in that field. And, you know, once these variants are identified and isolated and available to our laboratories, to our scientists, then you're going to get into probably at least a 2 to 3 month kind of engineering, re-engineering process. Let's assume that the vaccine can be rejiggered to address a specific variant. Even if you're able to figure it out in the laboratories how to do that, and the companies up here have remarkable track records in that area, you then have to figure out if you can manufacture it, and then you're going to get into the whole licensing issue and submitting your applications around the world. So, kind of optimistically, you're looking, I think, 3 to 6 months, probably even 6 to 12 months for companies to rejigger these vaccines. And even that is very compressed compared to what we knew before the pandemic. I mean, the closest probably we come to that is the annual flu vaccine, which is re-engineered to address the various mutations, the variants that we have. So we can do it, but when you see companies producing effective new vaccines, let's say in a 3 to 5 month period, that suggests there's a massive acceleration in there, and a lot of the normal processes are being compressed to achieve that.
I see. I mean, sorry. So I think with that in mind, I mean, reproducing new vaccines for the foreseeable future could be a real challenge for the industry. So I guess there's work going on behind the scenes to work out a way how they get around that. And that will continue, I'd imagine, yeah?
Yeah, there's the science, there's the engineering, there's also the manufacturing piece.
Yeah.
We're talking about large volumes. We're talking about billions of vials that need to be produced at the same quality, replicated over and over again. We're trying to avoid batch failures because there's only so much capacity in the system typically. And then, of course, even once you have it, and we know from the HOPE consortium here in Abu Dhabi, we know that even when you have it, then you're getting into storage, the distribution, the administration, often the refrigeration issues, the transport, the safe transport. So it's a complicated process, but it's really remarkable. I have to say, I've worked in the industry 30 years, and I've never been prouder to work in this industry than the last 2 years. I mean, you don't see the phone calls, but behind the scenes, we call each other and we cheer each other on all the time.
Right? This is what I was going to ask. My next question, actually, for Ahmed Rosh. Researching the background for the panelists here today, they all get along, they all know each other, they talk behind the scenes, and having this competition, these rivals, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but they do have these conversations. Ahmed, I wanted to ask you just how the communication process changed during the pandemic with your rivals, with your competitors, and how did that accelerate the process of bringing new medicines into the market here in the UAE?
It's an excellent question, Nick. Thank you so much, and thanks for Abu Dhabi Department of Health for the kind invitation to have this opportunity with the respected panel. I will reflect on what mentioned by Jeff. I think COVID-19 gave a great example about the power and the importance of collaboration and partnership. Collaboration with the government, with the healthcare community, and even with the pharmaceutical industry within each others, and even with non-traditional stakeholders. And the reason behind that there is a big responsibility to transform people's lives as well as to ensure the healthcare sustainability. Roche, as a global leader in pharmaceutical and diagnostics, played a major role when it comes for being under one roof, being the leader in personalized healthcare with truly differentiated medicine across different disease areas like infectious disease, ophthalmology, and oncology. And that put Roche in a position to be at the forefront, building on the expertise of the infectious disease, because COVID needs multiple approach when it comes to management the disease and the associated disease. And looking at last year, we are honored to have our partnership and collaboration with Dr. Asma and Abu Dhabi Department of Health to support Abu Dhabi vision to establish as a life science hub, as well as for the longer term vision of healthier Abu Dhabi. Talking about the topic of the innovation and access and research, we are all aware about that the product development process is lengthy and costly. And the need for effective, reliable diagnostic solutions is bigger than before. That's why Roche invested in genomic profiling and real-world data partnership, and that was reflected on the level of investment that Roche is doing in research and development by investing more than 12 billion CHF on an annual basis. And this level of contribution reflected in the people health by having Roche 32 medicines that are listed in the WHO.
Wow. Incredible numbers there.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Asma, if I may come back to you, if that's okay, for a follow-up question. Now, prior to the pandemic, Arab scientists all over the world have contributed amazing research. I think during the pandemic, for the first time, we saw that coming from the UAE. We saw the research coming from this country and being delivered all around the world for the benefit of the global population. How can the UAE build on that going forward and attract more clinical research to come to this country?
Excellent question. Actually, what we didn't do it alone. I mean, it's partnership. One of the key elements here in the success that we had during the response to COVID was in the partnership. So, and we realized the partnership is important even before COVID. We were fortunate to have our pharma colleagues and friends being with us in an advisory committee. We are establishing a collaborative approach. We ask, we discuss. We really don't have a specific boundaries for certain stakeholders. We have an open communication platform, transparency. We share our policies. What do you think? Because we believe that our partners are part of the solution. And it is not a directive approach. It's not just one line. It's a horizontal, collaborative approach. We go back and forth. We challenge. We ask. And we solve the problems together. And I believe learning to be agile is something that is now we became very proficient in. And when we can deliver the outcomes much faster, much efficient, why should we slow down? So we'll continue our partnership together, we'll continue being agile, and we'll continue to and perform as the best regulator that any partner would wish to be. And we would like to deliver the certain expectation because I believe we have a mutual objectives and there is always a win-win situation in any condition as long as we have a focus on the goal, a focus on the where do we want to reach, then we can all together achieve within their own specific elements of contributions, we can achieve and reach that goal. And we want to position Abu Dhabi as a life science hub in the region and in the world.
It seems well on course for that. Thank you, Dr. Asma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hala, if I can come back to you for a secondary question. The challenges ahead with dealing with COVID-19 treatments and how that will look in the years ahead. Managing that alongside the continued development of other treatments that will always be needed for oncology, for cardiovascular disease, for respiratory diseases. And this is all part of the UAE national agenda. How will pharma companies deal with that balance of managing COVID and these ongoing treatments that will always be required?
So thanks, Nick. That's a really important question. Simply because patients suffering from these specific therapy areas that you've mentioned were the most vulnerable during the pandemic. Their lives were the most impacted when we had no vaccines on the table. So they are the ones that, with the Department of Health and the authorities in the UAE, we were jointly thinking of how can we serve them better? How can we reach out to them? And that's where, again, it's working hand in hand, the collaborative approach. We focused during the pandemic, first and foremost, to continue making sure that these patients have access to their medication, whether through home-based care, whether through direct contact with the ministries, with the Department of Health and authorities. These patients need to keep on taking their medication. So that was the first thing that we've done. But in parallel, we also worked on bringing the hope I was talking about earlier. So that's the monoclonal antibody tackling this segment of immunocompromised patients. But the future is also coming with lots of learning. And the word acceleration was well spot on, because basically now we need to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. So the pandemic has come with lots of learning and pushed us out of our comfort zone, creating a new ways of working in the mindset of every of our esteemed companies. And hence, the use of new technologies, data, diagnostics, clinical research in these specific therapy areas that you've kindly mentioned will remain the focus, in addition to what's happening on the pandemic. But the main focus will be the chronic non-communicable diseases, basically.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think we've got time for a couple more questions as we keep rolling. Hossam, if I can come back to you, if that's okay. We know about the great work Pfizer's done with the vaccine production and the work you've done behind the scenes with your competitors here. Do you think we are in a new era of collaboration in this area of scientific research? Big pharma companies working together behind the scenes for the benefit of mankind. Is this going to be more of a common theme we're going to see in the future? Or do you expect to see a return to the pre-pandemic competition that we've historically seen with pharmaceutical companies?
Jeff?
I know you're all friends,
this,
really.
This is actually an unusual question, but it's actually a very good one. And it's a good chance to let the audience know what's happening behind the scene. So just think about two lifeguards who are running to save a life of a person. So do you think this is a competition? I actually cannot find a word to describe this, but if it is a competition, so it is a good one. So they compete for the first one who reach and save his life. And this is what exactly we do in the pharma. The collaboration between the pharma industry is old, actually. It's not a new thing that happened with the COVID. So maybe you know about the Pharma Association, which is the Pharmaceutical Association for the Manufacture of Medicine in America. This has been established, I think, in 1958. So long time back, the pharma industry, the manufacturers and the researchers are sitting together to see what actually they can do to save the life for the patients. So there is a lot of pharma association present in the world, like the IFPMA, the International Federation for the Pharmaceutical Manufactured and Association, and also all pharmaceutical companies are members here. So what exactly they do in such kind of forums or associations? So we discuss a lot of subjects, from regulatory, clinical research, legal and compliance, medical, different policies actually, and sometimes trade barriers that prevent or make the access difficult for the patients. So we collaborate, we discuss. And here in the Gulf, we have the PharMag, which is the Association for the International Pharmaceutical Companies, which it has almost, I think now 25 companies, international companies, and all the colleagues sitting here, they are members in this association. So during COVID, there was a kind of partnership also between us, and it has been announced with the beginning of association of the crisis of the COVID that we collaborated. Some companies actually, they provided manufacturing facilities to other companies to produce medicine. I mean, so we are all one actually in fighting the diseases, and we are all one in providing the tools that help the healthcare professionals and the governments to save life.
I see.
So I hope this answered the question. So if we go back again to the competition, as you were just saying, so it's good and healthy one, and I'm happy really to be part of this industry.
Healthy competition is good for everybody, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I was going to ask Jeff about changes to regulation, but go on, Jeff. You want to?
Just wanted to say, again, this year I'm coming up on my 30th year in the research-based pharmaceutical industry, and I've come to the conclusion over the years that we can compete fiercely, but we can also collaborate fiercely. And you know, Hossam touched on a lot of the important elements of that. You know, for years we've had cross-licensing agreements, joint collaborations on research projects. So it's not unusual to us. I think what was a little bit different was the pace in the last year or two. It really accelerated during COVID. But you know, our companies do work together, but we also compete pretty pretty darn hard in the market too, which is, as you said, a good thing.
Yeah. My follow-up question to you was going to be about how the regulations had changed and accelerated, but I wanted to focus on one of the biggest success stories of the pandemic, which was the development of sotrovimab and how that developed, and the UAE became the first country to have that into patients who were really ill, critically ill, and it helped save many lives. Can you explain to me briefly how that looked behind the scenes? Because it was quite a dramatic story, I understand.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I want to say working with the DOH and Abu Dhabi is exhilarating and exhausting. So when you work with today's DOH, you're working with the team like you say, okay, well, we could give you a briefing on that. And DOH will say to you, okay, how about tomorrow morning? So you have to reconfigure your organization to meet the expectations of today's DOH. I'll give you an example on sotrovimab. I think the original delivery contract was 4 to 6 weeks after licensing here in the UAE, and the UAE was the second country in the world to license the product within hours of US FDA. So, GSK is looking at it 4 to 6 weeks. That's pretty ambitious. I think we had a call the next day. Can you deliver within 4 to 6 days? So when you work with DOH, you need to get on your horse and ride. And we've had to change, our conventional approach working with Abu Dhabi. These guys are in a hurry, and that's a good thing. I think, what we saw was in terms of, I'll go back to collaboration and partnership. From the earliest days when we reached out and we said, hey, we think we might have an effective therapeutic, DOH asked for regular updates, medical updates. We provided those. We started working on the procurement very early, on the supply very early, because this was a globally constrained supply product. We talked about how we might have to change the guidelines very early. The night the delivery arrived from Italy, I was on the tarmac, Abu Dhabi airport. The plane rolled up. These guys were so fast. 3 hours later, they infused the first patient. She survived, by the way, that patient. So everything about it is in quick time when you're working with DOH. The other thing I'll add is, because Nick, you asked about a specific product. I think the colleagues had similar experiences. But what I really liked about DOH during the pandemic was they didn't freeze and paralyze. Like, Dr. Asma mentioned earlier, they continued to put the reforms in place and new policies in place to drive that ambition of a biopharma and life sciences hub. So not only are they fast, but they walk and chew gum.
This fast decision-making process seemed very important to get us to where we are today, I suppose, with hopefully coming out of the pandemic. Ahmed, lastly, if I can just come to you for one final question, please. The relationship you had with regulators in the UAE before the pandemic compared to now, how has that changed, and what impact has that been on how the industry worked and is working here?
First of all, I have to share something. What we are seeing now, that Abu Dhabi Department of Health is showing a leadership role for being the connector and the catalyst for short, medium, and long-term outcome. And this is something that is really motivating to have such a discussion today. Yet, I want to highlight something which is very important, that the population age and grow while reducing the cost of the society for better outcome for patients. There is a clear need for efficient and targeted research and development, as well as there is a great importance of robust healthcare ecosystem sharing knowledge and integrated personalized approach to empower the patient to manage their own health. Why I'm sharing this today? I'm sharing this today because this is actually the core of our partnership with Abu Dhabi Department of Health. We had one vision and one goal, that we need to deliver best outcome for the patient faster, inspired by the personalized and value-based healthcare approach, where each patient will receive the tailored medical advances based on their own disease and lifestyle. And imagine if you have the data and the technology focusing on the value rather than volume, how the system will learn and how the data will be turned into insights. And then when the system is learning, the patient will benefit and the people will benefit. And this is the core actually for our partnership. And just for an example, data from clinical studies and patients and real world data will help us to offer a tailored care for the patient, as well as will support significantly in the discovery of the new medicine. And here is come the role of the regulator by having an informed decision to accelerate access for innovation.
Yeah.
And this is something that we are witnessing in our collaboration with UAE and Abu Dhabi Department of Health.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Real insight there. If I can open the floor to any questions for the floor at all for our esteemed panel here today. Does anybody have any questions at all? No, nothing? Sorry? Very clear and efficient, yeah. Answered everyone's questions for them. If I can just pick on Jeff one last time. I've got a minute here. I was very lucky to get an invitation to go to see the GSK production plant in Belgium in, I think it was December 2019. Literally the same month, ready for emergency use. How is that possible to reduce that time span for bringing those drugs to market so quickly?
So I realize we've got about a minute. So I think what we kind of forget, Nick, is that all of the companies up here, we all invest anywhere between, let's say, 5, 6, and almost $15 billion a year in R&D. The industry as a whole invests more than $150 billion a year in R&D. This is just private sector R&D spending. So although we had to come up with these vaccines and therapeutics in very short time, like a year, we're working off platforms and science that's been going on for decades. So like, the mRNA technology platform has actually been, known to us for a couple decades. Now, the trick is how fast a Pfizer or a GSK or a Moderna can turn that into a viable product. But a lot of the research is there. Where we spend a lot of time, and this is unavoidable, will always be in the clinical research, and particularly in vaccines. You're talking tens of thousands of patients that have to be enrolled in these trials. But the good news is, we learn from our mistakes. We invest heavily every year. The public sector invests a lot in basic research. So when you combine it all up, even faced with a deadly pandemic, there's a lot to work with. There's a lot that's gone on for many, many years. There's a lot of scientific genius and capability there to work from.
I see. Thanks, Jeff. So in summary, if I bring this discussion to a close, if I could just go over a few points raised by the panel. Dr. Asma, you mentioned that partnerships are very important and crucial for this collaborative approach going forward towards solving problems together. And that's likely to continue for the future, for sure, to make Abu Dhabi a hotbed for life sciences going forward, yeah? Haleb, you mentioned about being agile and how important that was as part of the whole process of bringing new drugs to the market, and also prioritizing patients who are seriously ill during these difficult times to make sure they also have access to the medication they need to manage their chronic conditions, okay? Hossam, you mentioned this incredible idea about this memorandum of understanding you have to develop new researchers here in the country. I think it was to train researchers up to 500 by 2025. That's a real interesting aspect to your points raised today, and we look forward to seeing how that develops in the years to come, I think. So that's one to keep an eye on. And Jeff, you cited the remark about a research that's gone on over the last 2 years, and just the data that is now available in almost these live world trials rather than clinical trials, and the impact that's had as well on bringing these drugs to market. And Ahmed, your points, again, really fascinating insight there into what Roche is doing behind the scenes. And I think, again, your point with the clinical data and the value of that, making Abu Dhabi once again becoming a real hotbed of life sciences in the years ahead, and how pharmaceutical companies are working behind the scenes to make sure that happens faster than ever. So thank you guys for your points today. Really interesting. And that brings today to a close. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. Well done. Thanks, Jeff. First one. Thank you. That was really good. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much indeed. I got a scoop there as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Asma. Yeah, nice talking to you. Nice meeting.
Hello, how's that? It's very poppy. Guys, it's very poppy. No, it's very poppy. I sound like a dragon. Hi. Can you? Good afternoon and welcome to the Future of Healthcare, the series of talks that are being brought to you today by the Department of Health Abu Dhabi. I'm Brandy Scott. I'm the host of the Business Breakfast on Dubai Eye 103.8. And this afternoon we are talking collaboration. And if you'd like to collaborate with us, you can take a stool, move a little bit closer so that we feel a bit of participation with the audience. It's not often you say move a little bit closer in the last 2 years, is it? Apart from each other, but closer to us. How is that? We're talking collaboration. After 2 years of pandemic, we are looking at what we have learned about working together and what we could have done better. Now, the pandemic has changed the way the public, the private, and the non-profit sectors work together, and what that all means for the future of healthcare. And we've got around 40 minutes with you today. And then if we want, we can take a few questions from the audience at the end. But we're going to jump straight in and introduce our panel extremely quickly, and what a panel that we have as well. I'm going to run through the expertise that we have at our disposal, and I'm not going to do any of them justice. You have LinkedIn, if you'd like to see their whole bios and indeed connect. On the end there, we have Lena Jaluka, who is the Public Partnerships Manager for Unicef in the Gulf. She brings 24 years of experience in strategic partnership and resource mobilization to our panel. Unicef has been instrumental in the COVAX vaccination movement and working with Abu Dhabi on that, which we will be discussing. And next to her, Ahmed Al-Bastaki is the Chief Strategy Officer at RAFID, which is the UAE healthcare supply chain entity. Ahmed himself has 30 years of experience in this sector, leading major healthcare operation projects in terms of logistics and procurement. And directly next to me, a man who's been a voice on my radio station several times, Dr. Omar Najim, is the Executive Director of the Executive Affairs and Special Projects Office at the Abu Dhabi Health Authority. He is a member of the core Abu Dhabi COVID Gold Command team. So let us talk collaboration and the challenges that we had where everyone had to learn very quickly to work and play nicely together. Ahmed, if we start at the beginning of the pandemic, which needed an immediate real-time response without an awful lot of data, how quickly did you have to act? What kind of time frame did you have to take decisions, get budgets, and start working together?
Hi, everybody. Actually, at the beginning, it was the start of pandemic when we start to see it here in UAE. It was in Arab Health, during Arab Health 2020. We noticed the queue on the pharmacy for the masks, and so we understood that later that, yeah, there is a need, and the impact was beyond what we, despite we were prepared. We had the preparedness, we had everything available, but the impact was very big because it affected all the flights, affected logistics all around the world. There was a shortage of all the PPEs, shortage at each level of requirements for hospitals, including ventilators. That was the biggest challenge also, and the medication. So what was the decision is to go to the source and to get ready and prepare ourselves. So it was sourcing from the manufacturers, from the countries, and accordingly, what we noticed that within 2 months, we were almost ready for the pandemic. We are very well equipped with all the equipments, pharmaceuticals, and the PPEs, the most important that time. But decision making, I mean, in some situations, it could take 4 to 6 hours from up to down. So it was very smooth. Everybody was involved until today. The same situation, last 2 years till today. The decision, the hierarchy of the decision is really quick. It can go very fast, comes back very fast.
When we talk about collaboration with vaccines, which is going to be a major focus today, we usually think about distributing the vaccines. But at the very beginning of the pandemic, we were talking about collaborating on vaccines that didn't actually exist. Dr. Omar, do you want to tell me about Abu Dhabi's role in getting those vaccines to the point that they existed to get them out there in the first place?
So I think a few things to bear in mind when we are looking at the current pandemic that we lived through over the last 2 years. One of the key elements of it is we are living in a time that none of us has experienced before. So you can say it's also one of the largest crises to affect the humanity in our lifetime, and we're hoping that it wouldn't happen again. So we realized within 2 months of the start of the pandemic, as Ahmed was saying earlier, we started realizing the signs, and we felt it in UAE around end of January. By March time 2020, we started also looking at vaccines as one of the key enablers to get our society, our economy, and the wider world out of this pandemic. So what we did is we scanned the world of where development and clinical research and explorations of vaccine are happening. I remember spending days no end talking to academia, talking to companies, talking to even individuals who are at their home are looking at something specific, talking to different governments about what's the work happening around the vaccine. Obviously, there are plenty of them. I think by the latest number, there are about 220 vaccines in development. Some of them passed the mark, some of them are still to do that. And when we looked at that, we started realizing that the new technologies or the new terms being used, which is the mRNA, the viral vectors, not only didn't exist before, but the capacity to handle them is very scarce globally. So we started looking not only at when the vaccines are going to be available, collaborating with different developers, different companies, different academia, on supporting their research, supporting a pre-purchase agreement, supporting their manufacturing, but also working in parallel with the likes of Rafid, with the likes of the Abu Dhabi ports, with the likes of Etihad Cargo, on how we're going to transport, store, and distribute that vaccine safely. If you look at vaccines in general, they require specialized conditions in the best of times. So 2 to 8, handled with care all the time. Now you are looking at another dimension, which is -80, -20. To achieve the safe transportation, storage, and distribution, you need to collaborate across every single steps involved in the long supply chain from where the vaccine gets manufactured all the way to where the vaccine is needed, being it in one of the top Himalayan villages, or being it in rural Africa, or being it in the middle of Dubai or middle of Ohio. You still need to make sure that that vaccine arrives in the right time, the right place, to the right person, and most importantly, in the right condition. And that's where we started collaborating. We started collaboration for the benefits of UAE, and then we realized we have a capacity to offer the world, not only in terms of expertise, but also in terms of the infrastructure that exists in UAE. And we established the HOPE Consortium, and we took it from there.
Before we get to Lena, who is involved in both the HOPE Consortium and COVAX, Ahmed, do you want to explain to us what the HOPE Consortium is, what it was set up to do?
Yes, thank you. HOPE Consortium, it's a coalition, was established under the sponsorship and leadership of Department of Health. It consists of all the players who can guarantee the delivery of the vaccine from the manufacturer to, as Dr. Omar mentioned, to any village, even in Africa or on Himalaya, wherever. So what is it consists of? For example, we have RAFID as a procurement arm and contractual arm and financial arm in collaboration with DOH. Then you have Etihad Airline, which is the air freight logistics, Etihad Cargo. That's what they do, all the deliveries on the freight. Then we have Ediport, where we keep all the warehouses and the logistics part around it, and delivery and transportation. We have Bawabat Maqta, which is the technological arm or the data visibility arm for this provides the platform for this consortium. And also we have SkyCell, where is all the content to make sure all the vaccines moving within the required temperature. It is kept on the flight, on the land, on transportation, all the way, and track it. So these all members come together to create a HOPE Consortium, where is working together, for example, moving a vaccine from, for example, from China. It comes to the airplane all the way, kept in the required temperature, up to the warehouses, then making sure it is kept at the 2 to 8 or minus 80, whatever required, and then delivering it. And now, even lately, we start to add on HOPE Consortium is another scope added, which is with Biomedica, that's also apply vaccinating and administering the vaccines, not only any place out of country.
Lena, tell me what the HOPE Consortium has meant in practice then for UNICEF, because you work very closely with COVAX, which is the WHO, the giant global vaccinate everyone, no one left behind initiative, which the HOPE Consortium has also been helping. Tell us how all of this works in practice.
So maybe I can talk a little bit about how UNICEF ended up being in this position in the first place. It's really no coincidence, because UNICEF is the largest vaccine buyer globally. We purchase some 2 billion doses of vaccines. This is for routine immunization, for outbreak response, etc. And we help deliver those vaccines to children all over the world as well. And when the pandemic hit, UNICEF, of course, was called on to lead on behalf of COVAX, the effort of procuring and then distributing the vaccines. And we are doing that on behalf of, and I'll just make sure I get the numbers right, 92 low and middle income countries. But we're also supporting the procurement for more than 97 upper middle income and high income countries as well. So you can imagine, I mean, we're talking about, if you add up all those numbers, we're talking about 4/5 of the world's population. It's a massive, massive number. Just last week, on the 15th of January, UNICEF delivered its billionth COVID-19 vaccine. And this was a huge moment for us, as you can imagine, but we didn't really have much time to celebrate because we still have much more to do. And because of that, partnerships like the one we have with the UAE government and with the HOPE Consortium become absolutely crucial. This is not something that UNICEF or any other entity can take on its own. I mean, COVAX needs all the support it can get, and we were lucky that in the UAE government and the HOPE Consortium we found that partner.
while you've got the microphone, do you want to tell us very quickly what the pandemic has meant for children?
How much time do I have? In addition to disrupting the health systems all over the world, disrupting education for a very long period, some 630 million children have been left without school or had their education interrupted for the duration of the pandemic. I mean, we're talking about a huge loss of education opportunities. Children's literacy, numeracy has gone down significantly. Children have missed out on nutrition that was provided to them through their schools. Mental health has become a huge issue for children and young people across the globe. So really, it's a multidimensional crisis that we are having. In fact, it's the biggest childhood crisis that UNICEF has faced in its 75 years of existence.
So let's talk about the challenges of tackling the part of that COVAX and the HOPE consortium and this collaboration can. Let's talk, we've mentioned temperature quite a lot here. Can you give me some practical examples of dealing with temperature issues in different countries? Anybody? With people with different levels of training, of equipment, of freezers to them. Who wants to paint a picture for me of what this is actually involved?
I'll take that question, but I'll come to the temperature one, but I'll just want to highlight a couple of other challenges. So one is building on what Lena was saying. One of the biggest challenges that we need to tackle is the mindset of different areas around the world, different countries around the world, which is there is a need for an acute realization that we are in this together. Nobody's going to be safe until everybody is safe. The pandemic started with one person, and unless we go back to zero, it can't re-emerge again and again, and we are in the same place that we are having since last December, which is the emergence of a new variant. Second is we need all the resources together. And until we open our resources and we start collaborating with each other, the challenge of what UNICEF is trying to do and the impact it's having is going to continue to linger even after we get rid of the virus. The virus is a healthcare challenge by itself, but it will have many ramifications. We're probably feeling it now on economies, on societies, and even stabilities of countries nowadays. And some of it is being felt now, but more of it is going to come sooner. There is in the US, they are looking at a record inflation happening. In the UK, they are saying by April, they start realizing the economic impact. And if you look at this and try to project it on smaller societies, smaller communities around the world, then you will start having the feel of the impact or the real impact of this pandemic. Now, around the temperature, I'll come to that, and I promise I'll answer that. So, minus 20 or minus 80, not only some people probably around the audience, and me included, did not hear that such temperature exists in the first place. So I think that the furthest I've experienced is about minus 2. So minus 20, minus 80, when we started looking at mRNA, we started talking just to understand how you get to that temperature. We looked at fish importers. How do you get the fish from Chile to UAE? What temperature do you use? We talked to people who works in the oil and gas to understand how you get the gas to be liquefied and you put it in the ship. Again, it's something that we haven't experienced. So, this is us working in healthcare, saying we didn't experience this. Let alone the person who's handling the vaccines on the tarmac in an airport. Let alone the person who's handling the vaccine at the clinic in the front line. How do you handle it? Do you wear gloves? Do you not wear gloves? You don't know. So all of this need to be looked at very carefully. Understand what the training involved. Because nowadays, the guy who's working in the airport is handling minus 20, minus 80 every day. And need to look at it and know how to handle it in order for the vaccine to arrive in the right place and at the right temperature. Because you have to remember, the vaccine itself is a liquid in a glass. It does nothing. It saves no life. What saves life is vaccination. You need to get that liquid into somebody's shoulder and to somebody's system. So vaccine doesn't save life, vaccination does. And part of that is to get the supply chain all well and sorted to the absolute last chance of failure. You need to eliminate all of that to get as much of the world vaccinated as soon as possible.
Ahmed, how do you deal with the human aspect in that? People often are the weakest link in any chain. What have you had to do to train people on the ground in different countries to make sure that what Dr. Omar has said happens?
Exactly. Adding to Dr. Omar's points, it's creating or developing the vaccine. It was really challenging situation, but again, once the vaccine is delivered by the manufacturer, okay, it came and there's FDA certificates, everything done. You delivering this vaccine again, taking it to where it needed, that was the second challenge. Many countries we noticed the idea of RAFID came when it started. We were thinking it was in April 2020 when we started to think about, okay, how this is going to finish, this pandemic. At the end, everybody needs to be vaccinated. That time we were talking about, is it 1 dose? Is it 2 doses? Is it pre-filled vaccines or is it vial? All that, these questions to be answered, building up around it. So we understood that we don't have that capacity. We needed to work with DOH and all other players here to find out, okay, how we can work it out. That's where the logistics, RAFID DC, which is a part of the HOPE Consortium Distribution Center, is used. But the result was that we were looking for 20 million, that making, okay, if it's 5 million, we can reuse it. No, we ended up having location for 100, the capacity for 120 million vaccine in one time, which can be used up to 6 billion. Doctor, if I'm not, that's his calculation it was. So that's a big capacity. And accordingly, we were like, okay, now we see that it's not only helping UAE. Now we can extend our help to other countries. When we start to see around, there is many countries, they have no availability at all. And you have to build all the logistics around it. Think about it, country by country. Each country has its own situation. Some countries, they can receive it in hospitals. Some countries, they have to go by tent. And you have to stop the airplane with the sky cell containers, using that for a few days so they can use it one by one until everybody is vaccinated. That was one of the biggest challenges I can see, and we overcome today with all this integrated team and all the collaborations from everybody, from government, from NGOs, from private sector. Accordingly, I feel today we are really going on a right direction, but again, it's gonna get there, and everybody hopefully not only will be vaccinated.
Is belief about what should happen with the virus an issue with collaboration? We've got some countries pursuing a zero COVID, an elimination strategy. Others were looking at herd mentality in the beginning. Some, have gone to the sort of live with COVID situation. How do you collaborate when there isn't sort of one global goal almost?
I mean, you adapt, right? Because Unicef has years and years of experience of working with very different contexts. So through our response to the COVID-19 pandemic right now, we're working with governments like Sweden. We're working with countries like Jordan and Turkey and Egypt, but we're also working with Zambia, Burkina Faso, Sudan, where the resources available and the readiness of the country to receive the vaccine is completely different. So there's a lot of, it's a multi-layered issue, because there's the issue of vaccine hesitancy, acceptance, etc. There's also the issue of the country's readiness to receive those vaccines. There's the immense logistic challenges that come with the vaccine delivery, where partners like Hope Consortium are really supporting UNICEF and other players. But the thing is, regardless of which country you're looking at, to come back to Dr. Umar's point, no one is safe until everyone is safe. So you have to find a way to work with each country depending on its own existing capacity. And UNICEF is doing a lot of work, particularly in low and middle income countries, to make sure that their capacity of the health system is boosted so that they're able to receive the vaccines, and then that they're able to deliver those vaccines to the people who need them. And yeah.
Which brings us to the issue of vaccine inequality. How do we tackle that?
Vaccine inequality is, of course, the biggest concern for UNICEF and the other COVAX partners, because we really need to make sure that this picture that we have at the moment, we've delivered 1 billion doses. Most of those have been to low and middle income countries, but we're still talking about countries that haven't received a single dose. Nobody has actually been vaccinated, or the numbers are so small that it's negligible. And without having the vaccination of the majority of the population, it's going to keep happening, and then you have the new variants that you need to address. So it's really a big challenge for us, the issue of vaccine inequality. And the only way we can do that is through partnerships. We need all the support we can get. We need governments to share their vaccine doses. We need governments to contribute flexible funding to organizations that are working on this response, like Gavi, like UNICEF, so that we are able to purchase the vaccines that are needed. And then we need partners like the Hope Consortium to help us deliver those vaccines to the countries where they need to be given.
Are governments doing that?
Governments have really come together. Everyone, it has been a global effort. But I think one of the lessons learned, and we'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later towards the end, one of the lessons that I think we have learned is that you cannot be prepared enough, right? I mean, this is coming. This is not going to be the last one. So it's just a matter of doing this collectively, all the governments of the world coming together with the private sector, with the public sector, to make sure that we are all very well prepared for when something like this happens again. And we're not out of it yet, right? I mean, we're really still struggling. I mean, the impact on some countries, for example, Tonga, they've just had a volcanic eruption and then a tsunami. The country has already been in lockdown for 2 years because of COVID-19. You can imagine the impact that has had on children, on families there. And on top of that, now you have a natural disaster that they need to deal with. So, I mean, there's really so much more that we need to be doing, all of us together collectively, because the needs vary from country to country. I think some countries, for example, here in the UAE, we are blessed. We have very strong health systems that can adapt and that can respond very quickly. Other countries are not so fortunate. So we really need to pull each other up and make sure that we are responding to it as a global collective effort.
Ahmed, Dr. Omar, does anyone have another comment on vaccine inequality before we do move on, as Lena said, to what we're learning?
Again, a question?
Vaccine inequality.
Yeah. I mean, what today we are doing here, Hope Consortium, even it's helping for the... If countries not getting vaccine due to incapabilities, shortage on the infrastructure, again, RAFID is there. For example, with also Department of Health all together as a Hope Consortium. Hope Consortium, what it does, it helps in that inequality and availability of the vaccine and deliver it to any location, working with UNICEF, working with DOH, working with the government. That's one of the achievements, and we are very glad of. Today, we were able to deliver 250 million vaccine around the globe, up to 50 countries. So this, I would believe that this is a huge achievement of Hope Consortium and help the world to come over this pandemic.
Dr. Omar, what could the world have done better?
I think if you look at the different countries and their response to the pandemic globally, you can see that the key success factor that relates to the success of tackling the pandemic is the collaboration. And they're appreciating that this is a global pandemic that needs a global solutions. Whatever the solutions that you're going to implement at a local level is going to go as far as is the world safe here. So you can close your borders, you can provide the best of treatments, you can say I'm going to keep all the vaccines to myself, but at the end of the day there is no escaping from the fact that this is a global pandemic. I think that the world could do better, and I think the Unicef, WHO is doing it. So the issue around vaccine equality, there's no issue about getting the vaccines to the different countries. There is an issue about manufacturing. 80% of the manufacturing is happening on a handful of places. Surprise, surprise, more than 80% of the world lives somewhere else. And you need to get these vaccines to these places. Second is, we talked a lot and we had the experience of getting these vaccines to low or low middle income countries for a long time now. But the infrastructure goes beyond just needing 228. I think UNICEF has realized that most of the vaccines being developed need a technology that goes beyond 228. And the countries that deserve to receive these vaccines are not capable to manage to receive these things. And that goes even beyond that. They don't have an infrastructure in terms of electricity, in terms of security to manage these vaccines. So we're going into even deeper situation of the inequality that exists in the world today. And we need to all ask ourselves, how can we help, not only at government levels, but even at society, communities, and individual level, in order to get to the right place.
So let's look at what we have learned from the pandemic and the collaboration within it. You mentioned the new mRNA technology there, which has really been brought to the forefront and tested in this pandemic. Let's start there. What have we learned about its limits, its possibilities, its capabilities?
So, as Ahmed was saying earlier, what you have after 10 months of the start of the pandemic is several safe and effective vaccines. This is a triumph for science, a triumph for the human endeavor. And now we need to make that even equally triumphant in terms of equity to vaccines and even pushing the technology further. So mRNA today is being used for vaccine, but mRNA is here to stay. mRNA is going to be used for cancer treatment, is going to be used for immunological disease treatment. Along with certain other technologies, the viral vector technologies, the monoclonal antibodies technology that came to the fore to address lots of problems that we have in terms of pharmacological solutions for conditions and diseases we have today. So it's going to be continued, and the world need to be prepared to use these technologies through an infrastructure that need to be in place to handle it in the right way. mRNA, there are many other technologies being used. We need to open our mind. We need also to learn from the processes that we implemented during COVID time, and how can we replicate that into other areas of what we deal with diseases or healthcare in general.
What have we learned about the physical practicalities of moving things from A to B that will help not just with pandemics, but healthcare in general? Dr. Ahmed.
What we learned today here is that working with all together, for example, government, private sector, NGOs, all of them, they need to collaborate and open the channels among each other. We need a lot of, we learned a lot of decision making and flexibility around it, and having the visibility. This is very important. You don't know what is behind what's happening, and if you don't have visibility on the laws, the regulations, the logistics, these are very important. And I think what we learned today, how to overcome these unknown situations, being prepared. Advanced planning is very important. We do advanced planning on daily basis. I think we are in touch with Dr. Amar maybe 2-3 times, sometimes a day we met just to be prepared for not only that vaccines and what you're doing, but also what in Hope Consortium, what we see today, how we can expand the scope of Hope Consortium, not to go only vaccine, go for others, for example, COVID-related PPEs, COVID-related medications, and so on. So that's, I think, one of the most important that what we learned after 10 months. I think we completed 1 year now. So, so that's I think today we are working on it and we are expanding on that.
Lena, what's been the biggest takeaway for UNICEF so far?
I think the thing that was most striking about this pandemic is the broader human impact of it, right? Because when it first hit, you might be tempted to think this is a health crisis, but then there are so many other dimensions to it. The impact on the lives of children around the globe has been profound. I mean, just because of the pandemic, we've had 100 million children fall into multidimensional poverty. This is just in the duration of the pandemic. This is a staggering number. I mean, I don't think we've seen this level of decline into poverty in our lifetime. So these are the kinds of issues that we are concerned about. These are the things that keep us up at night. The fact that children have missed out on 2 years of education, the fact that it's going to take them so much longer, and sometimes it's not going to even be possible for these children to recover the loss of education that has happened. So these are really the things that we need to all be looking at. How can we recover faster? How can we make sure that children's mental health is addressed adequately? Make sure that they're getting sufficient nutrition that they've missed out on because they're not going to school, etc.
Dr. Tedros from the WHO said today that we shouldn't assume that COVID will be over with Omicron. He said that the conditions were basically perfect, and here he is talking about vaccine inequality, for a new variant to emerge. Are we prepared for that? Don't fight over it.
Please go ahead, please.
Yes, of course. I hope he's wrong. But we are today much, 10 times more prepared. We are much have knowledge about how to deal with it. We know how to advance plan. Any changes happening, we monitor everything on daily basis, watching. In case that's, it's a possibility and high possibility to happen. So it is in our plan. It is on our radar all the time, and we are ready for it. In having the capacity, expanding the capacity. So that's what we are talking about. The learning is to have more visibility and have more scopes. So we are not just talking about vaccine, any other related to COVID or other pandemic in future. We are ready for it.
So what's the focus now, Dr. Omar? What's your gut feeling about where we hopefully are with the pandemic, and what's your priority?
So I think for UAE in general, we are in a good situation. And I think it's because of what Ahmed was saying earlier and because of what Lena was saying earlier. It's the planning, the ahead planning. So in dealing with the pandemic, we had 3 things that most of the countries around the world did, which is focus on prevention, which is stopping people from getting infected in the first place. So that includes the massive testing exercise that we usually do every day. That include the vaccination, that include the education, that include on identifying patients early when they get infected so as to break the chain of infection. The second is about the treatment and trying to provide the right capacity and the right capabilities and the innovation to support the best treatment outcome when somebody gets infected, especially for the individuals who are at high risk of getting severe disease. Last but not least is how can we prepare and plan for the next one. They go, so we always, in UAE, and that's proven, it's planning for the worst, but working for the best. So your planning is always failing if you think it's going to be better and better tomorrow. You need to plan what's your capacity, capabilities, and innovation that need to be in place just in case a new variant has hit. At the same time, all of this, we're living through a global pandemic. There are so many variables that keep changing every day, not because of the work we are doing, but because it's a global pandemic. But also not forgetting the ambitions that we got from the last 2 years, the aspirations that we planned in UAE going forward. You look at the newspapers over the last year, over the last 2 years, it's not filled with news about COVID. It's filled about ambitions of doubling the industrial output of UAE. It's about going to Mars. It's about planning to go to Mercury. It's about sending the first man to the moon. It doesn't only provide help, but it also gives you a glimpse about what's the aspiration of this country. If there's anything that UAE has come from over the last 2 years, is the confidence in ourselves to tackle whatever life is going to throw at us. And we're hoping that we can take that confidence to help in our humanitarian efforts that we did, and we want to continue to do on bringing better place for the wider world.
Well, that's the absolutely perfect place to leave our conversation today, and bang on time as well. See, this is what 2 years of intense procurements and logistics will do for you. You'll finish to the minute. Thank you very much, Dr. Omar Najim, the Executive Director of the Executive Affairs and Special Projects Office at the Abu Dhabi Health Authority. Next to him, Ahmed Al-Bastaki, the Chief Strategy Officer at the UAE Healthcare Supply Chain Form and Entity Rafid, and Lena Jaluka, Public Partnerships Manager for Unicef. Fortunately for us, based here in the Gulf. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing that with us this afternoon.